Everybody, it's me, the Lit Teacher, and I am back with another 10 language features you need to know. A fast game's a good game. Let's go. Extended metaphor. Okay, in a previous video, I've talked about metaphors. I've even touched on extended metaphors, but let's just talk about what extended metaphors actually are. So this is when a metaphor is extended. It could be across lines in a poem, it could be across paragraphs in a piece of prose, or it could be across an entire text, okay? So it's just when a metaphor shows up multiple times, the same kind of metaphoric imagery, if you will. Let's think about some examples here. The Road Not Taken, very famous poem by Robert Frost. The entire poem is metaphoric. It's an extended metaphor, this idea that the road is actually about the decisions that you take in life. That's what the whole poem is essentially about. Romeo and Juliet, there are so many references to the stars, okay? If you read that play, they're very, very hard to miss. These are examples of extended metaphors. You see them right across the play. Society as a farm in Animal Farm. The entire novella is an extended metaphor, this idea that the farm relates to society in some way. And yeah, a really popular one in TVs and film, zombies. Zombies are just like a grand extended metaphor, usually for consumerism. It's, yeah, pretty deep in that respect. Extended metaphor. Oxymoron. Oxymoron is just when you combine two completely contradictory or opposing things in quick succession, usually in a line. So let's look at some examples here. The silence was deafening. Okay, silence being deafening, that is impossible. It's an oxymoron. They're two completely opposing things. War is peace. Definitely not. It's an oxymoron. And Night of the Living Dead. The dead are very much not living, so it's an oxymoron. Now, this is different to juxtaposition, okay? Juxtaposition is when you place two things together to highlight differences. So this is kind of similar to contrast, which I've also discussed in a previous video, but it's different to oxymoron because they might not be in really quick succession. You're likely to see juxtaposition potentially like more broadly across a text, although it could be in the same line technically. Let's look at some examples of juxtaposition here. So in The Great Gatsby, there is a juxtaposition between the glamour and excess of the parties and the empty loneliness of Gatsby's life. Juxtaposition. In Macbeth, you have characters that are juxtaposed. These are also called foils, by the way. I'll probably talk about that in another video, but you could look it up if you're really obsessed. But Macbeth and Banquo are kind of juxtaposed. Macbeth is seen as kind of being dishonorable, while Banquo is like incredibly honorable, so their character traits are juxtaposed. We also see this later in the play with Macbeth and Macduff. Last but not least, in a poem Follower by Seamus Heaney, really fantastic poem, highly recommend that you go and read it. You have juxtaposition between the past and the present, and also juxtaposition between a father and a son, because the entire poem is about this father who's really amazing at plowing, and the son watches him plow, and he like wishes he could plow as well as his dad. And then the punchline at the end of the poem is now the son has grown up and the dad is old and decrepit, and the roles have been reversed. So it's kind of a juxtaposition. Dialogue. This is fully an exam hack one. It's just any words that are exchanged between characters. It's just when people say stuff in a text, right? Okay. Can be in a film, obviously, that's dialogue, but also just in a novel or even in a poem when someone says something, that's dialogue. So yeah, examples. Hey, you okay? It's dialogue. Can't repeat the past. Why, of course you can. Dialogue. Hey, boo. Very famous line from To Kill a Mockingbird. Dialogue. All of that stuff is dialogue. Just one tip on dialogue. It's not really enough to just pull out a quote, call it dialogue, and be like, boom, I've ticked off a technique here. If you're using dialogue like in an exam context, if you're writing about it in an essay, you really need to know kind of why it's important and what it's saying, and it can't just be kind of like randomly picked and be like, yeah, I got some dialogue, I got a technique, give me an excellence now. That's not going to fly. A cliche is just a commonly overused phrase, but it can also refer more generally to anything that lacks originality. Let's look at some examples. You only live once. Time will tell. Think outside the box. These are all cliches, okay? They're things that people say when they can't really think of something original. It's cliche. Colloquialism or colloquial language. Okay, so colloquialisms, colloquial language are informal words or phrases. They're the kinds of things that you would say to your mates, probably, all right? Not the type of things that you would say to your headmaster. That would be formal language. They're usually regional or cultural in origin. In other words, they kind of apply to a certain time and place potentially. Here are some examples. I'll try not to do accents. Sure, bro, mean as. It's kind of New Zealand colloquialism. Bloody oath, mate, struth. It's kind of an Aussie colloquialism. How's it, braai later? It's kind of a South African colloquialism. And then a really interesting one is "You're coming, fam," which probably started off as an African American colloquialism, but it's kind of broadened to be used by a variety of people all across the world. And this is where that might just be worth mentioning, like a distinction with slang. Arguably, slang and colloquial language are kind of more or less the same thing, but sometimes I think about slang being a little bit more trend based, a little bit more fad based, kind of the thing that people are saying now but might not be saying next year. Whereas colloquialisms and colloquial language are usually kind of more long lasting and stand the test of time and have that regional cultural aspect to them as well. Jargon. All right. Jargon is highly specific words that relate to a specific field. What I mean by that is like a specific profession or a specific group of people or a certain activity. It's words that relate to that thing and they're usually super specific. Here are some examples to try and understand this one. RAM, gigabyte, cloud. That would be computer IT jargon. Par, birdie, caddy, slice, something close to my heart, the game of golf, probably doesn't mean anything to anybody that doesn't play golf. DM, viral, influencer, this is all jargon that relates to social media. And syllabus, rubric, pedagogy, that's one for the teachers watching the video out there. This is all academic, educational jargon. Now we are moving into irony. Okay, now I want to make a distinction between the three different types of irony. Irony is a very, very loose term, which kind of often typically just means like when you think one thing, but then the opposite happens. That's kind of how people think about irony. But there are actually specific types of irony, and it will help us if we can kind of understand what each one is. So the first one is verbal irony. So verbal irony is when something is said, but it has a different, usually completely opposite meaning. So again, examples are going to help us out here. So imagine if somebody said, "Ah, what a great day," as they looked outside at rain pouring down. It's verbal irony. They're making a kind of sarcastic remark about the fact it's a great day when the reality is it's definitely not. And that's also where I just want to mention here that sarcasm is arguably a form of verbal irony, because in almost every instance, sarcasm is when you kind of say one thing, but you actually kind of mean the other. Let's look at some kind of literary examples here. So Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet, when he is fatally stabbed, he says, I, a scratch, a scratch. It's definitely not a scratch. You're going to die, bro. But okay, it's verbal irony. And yeah, if you watch the television series Friends, there are compilations on YouTube of the character Chandler, RIP Matthew Perry, who used to basically say stuff like, "Could this be any worse?" And he had a whole lot of catchphrases like this. And essentially, it's verbal irony. You know, he's kind of saying one thing, but he means another. Okay, my favorite is dramatic irony. Now, dramatic irony is a kind of structural device within our narratives. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is stories. Dramatic irony is when we, the audience or the reader, know something, but the character on stage or on screen or in your book does not. Okay, it's when we have more information than they do. This is dramatic irony. Some examples. So, in the play Othello by William Shakespeare, there's a lot of dramatic irony in Shakespeare, trust me. Basically, in that play, we know for the entirety of the play that Iago just completely wants to destroy Othello, but Othello somehow has no idea. So it's dramatic irony. And the whole tension of the play is us kind of being like, when are you going to figure this out, Othello? When are you going to realize this guy is trying to like ruin your life? And that's what actually makes the play exciting and tense. So dramatic irony kind of works to escalate the suspense in something because we're sort of waiting for that grand revelation when a character finally figures something out. Another example would be Titanic. Like, we know the boat's going to hit an iceberg, but like nobody else does. And yeah, in Jane Eyre, for example, we know that Rochester is married, but Jane Eyre does not. And this kind of creates tension and anxiety for us as a reader. So that is dramatic irony. Situational irony. I think this is kind of the irony that most of us think of when we think of irony. It's basically when an outcome or an event is completely different to what we might expect. Examples are going to help us once more. So, Romeo and Juliet, tried and true classic here. We think that they're going to be together and be in love and yada, 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 but what happens? They die. The outcome that we expected is not the outcome that we get. In science fiction, like the entire genre kind of has this situational irony where there's often this notion of this brilliant invention that's been created. And yeah, the situational irony is that it ends up like destroying the world or becoming like dangerous and killing a whole lot of people. You kind of get this right going back to Frankenstein. And Happy Gilmore, again, another golf reference. I'm sorry, people. I really love golf. But the situational irony in Happy Gilmore is that he's terrible at hockey, which is a sport that he really, really loves. And he's brilliant at golf, which is a sport he thinks is for losers. So that is the situational irony of Happy Gilmore. And that's another 10 language features you need to know. I have two other videos, one called 10 language features you need to know and 10 more language features you need to know. I've now got this one here. They're all in a playlist. You can check them out on my channel. And if you want other really good content that's going to help you with English, you can like and subscribe. There'll be some kind of thing that you can click on somewhere over here. It would help me out greatly and you're not going to miss anything. So until next time, I'm the lit teacher and kakite.